Vladimir Putin has invoked the specter of the 1943 Battle of Stalingrad as a justification for his ongoing invasion of Ukraine. World leaders distorting history to support their actions is nothing new, but it is time to target the historical accuracy of Putin's analogy. On Thursday, February 2nd, Russian President Vladimir Putin attended a ceremony to mark the 80th anniversary of the Soviet Union's victory at the Battle of Stalingrad. While Putin used the occasion to make a convoluted comparison of that epic World War II battle to Russia's current invasion of Ukraine, the fact remains that Stalingrad was the bloodiest martial clash in the history of mankind. Lost in Putin's analogy is the fact that at Stalingrad it was Soviet forces, which included both Russian and Ukrainians, that defeated Hitler's Axis coalition. The current conflict is between Russian and pro-Russian Ukrainian militias against the NATO-supported armed forces of Ukraine. While the destruction and casualty rate in this current war seems unthinkable to Canadians, they are a mere pittance compared to the Soviet sacrifice in World War II. In the first 12 months since Putin launched an invasion force of 190,000 Russian troops into Ukraine, Western intelligence agencies estimate the Russians have suffered 80,000 killed. Although Ukraine's battlefield losses are not reported, objective analysis would indicate that they have suffered a similar number of soldiers killed. That would amount to 160,000 fatalities in 12 months for an average of 13,330 combat deaths per month. To put that in perspective, the 5-month-long Battle of Stalingrad claimed an estimated 2 million lives. That averages out to 13,330 deaths every single day, 30 times the fatality rate of the current war. The nature of warfare has evolved over the ages, as has modern society's willingness to accept unquestioningly massive losses of human life. Canadians in April 1917 hailed the capture of Vimy Ridge in France, despite the fact that in that 2-day battle, the Canadian Army Corps suffered 10,600 casualties, of which roughly 3,600 were fatal. It was a steep price to pay for a few hundred yards of ridgeline. During the Second World War, Canadians experienced and accepted a significant loss of soldiers during the Dieppe raid of August 1942. This amphibious assault landing of over 6,000 infantry was a predominantly Canadian effort. In theory, the German-occupied port of Dieppe, France, was to be captured and held by the Canadians for a brief period, before the attacking force was to make a calculated withdrawal. However, as the actual raid unfolded, tanks became trapped on the beaches and the Canadian infantry were pinned down by heavy German fire. Within 10 hours, the fiasco had fully unfolded. 3,623 of the 6,086 Allied soldiers who landed on the beach had been killed, wounded, or captured by the Germans. By contrast, during the 10-year combat commitment of Canadian troops to Afghanistan, the Canadian military suffered 158 fatalities and 2,000 plus physically wounded or injured. It was not a war we could ever win, as our soldiers were part of a US-led occupation of a foreign nation with an unceasingly hostile population. As such, the relatively few Canadian soldiers killed and wounded still made the Canadians question whether or not the toll was worth it. In the end, the Canadian government cut our losses and withdrew troops from the mission. At Stalingrad, Hitler's Axis forces posed an existential threat to the people of the Soviet Union. The Soviets had no option but to succeed on the battlefield or submit to Nazi tyranny. That is where Putin's rationale of comparing the Stalingrad battle to the present invasion of Ukraine falls apart. It is the Ukrainians, in this instance, that feel they face an existential threat. As such, they are exhibiting a willingness to self-sacrifice on a scale that Canadians simply cannot imagine. This has been On Target, and I'm Scott Taylor.